Isn't it ironic how an album that was meant to be the most intimate, vulnerable, and lonely project yet sold the least? Post Malone's 12 Carat Toothache exposes the flaws of the music industry and how people can't digest deep themes and seek short-term pleasure over long-lasting satisfaction. Exploring themes of suicide, self-hate, and immense pain to pure bliss, this album is a shining beacon of the problem with the music industry. How can an album that opens the door to an artist's darkest moments be the least best-selling, therefore least listened to, at least on release, album of an artist's career? Previously to this album, and still riding the wave of success off of his last album, Hollywood's Bleeding, the 7th most streamed album of all time, Post Malone was all but literally on top of the music world. He literally managed to get Ozzy Osbourne and Travis Scott on the same song. Circles was going through the roof in popularity, and he was touring a sold-out show across the globe that attracted tens of millions of people. But then COVID hit, and the world died for a while. Everything was shut down, and feelings of isolation were at an all-time high. So, Post took a long break. He moved to Malibu and almost went radio silent. In 2020, all we saw from him was a merch drop and a few pictures posted on Instagram. There wasn't much. In 2021, we got Motley Crue, his first single in 2 years, which is what sparked the idea that this is what we should come to expect from Post in the future. While it wasn't super exciting to people at first, as I thought it sounded too simple and that he didn't change enough of his sound, all combined with the fact that this song just ended up being a single, that it never amounted to anything, left people wondering if this is what he was going to experiment with in the future, and over time began to become what people came to expect for his next album, something definitely more rap focused. Despite all of this, anticipation of Post's next work skyrocketed. People loved Hollywood's Bleeding. Being his most commercially successful project to date, fans expected more of this, as they labeled it as his peak or the type of music that he fits perfectly into. It wasn't quite all rap, but at the same time, it wasn't all pop. It was a mix of both. This is what worked so well for him. It almost felt like something that he had been hard at work over the past 4 years had come to life. He played his cards perfectly with his first trio of albums. He started with Stoney, which was rough around the edges but showcased him as an artist, continued with Beer Bongs and Bentleys, where he furthered his rap craft and tenfolded his commercial success, and ended the trilogy on a project that felt like his magnum opus. However, creating something as incredible as Hollywood's Bleeding set the bar really high for him, which meant he had to come back with something that was on the same level, if not better than Hollywood's Bleeding, in order to pick back up right where he left off. While the concept of Hollywood's Bleeding is more of a breakdown of a project about LA and more broadly the music scene, and that the music industry is a self-immolating machine and that indulging in that lifestyle will greatly drain you, which focuses more societally, 12 Carat Toothache is the eventual full self-personal breakdown for Post. This album ultimately serves as a release of all those incredibly dark, pent-up feelings that Post harbored since he became famous and what the world did to him. The opening of 12 Carat Toothache perfectly sets the mood with a track that could almost be considered an overture, covering the dark side of fame and his reputation and how he needs to show off for people. Reputation is without a doubt his most vulnerable intro track and overall one of his deepest tracks to date. Lines like "Take my own life just to save yours" and "Let me choke on my cigarettes and heavy debt," and overall how this song flows exemplify how dark Post's life got. Though some do complain about there being too much of a tonal shift into Cooped Up, I think this works perfectly and actually exemplifies what he's trying to convey here. While the entire album might sound like it's focused around the dark side of fame, what he's also talking about here is that he finds immense joy in things as well, really showing how open this album is. Cooped Up was written about feeling good about being free, both in the sense of music and being stuck at home during COVID and suffering from all those feelings. Wrapped Around Your Finger has the same overall idea. While not a song about being free, it's deeply about being in love with someone and starting a committed relationship. When this album was made, Post had just recently gotten married, and so this song is dedicated to her, as Post frequently mentions in interviews. And since this song isn't a breakup song, which he's no stranger to, it's obviously a happy one. Songs like Lemon Tree, on the other hand, do go back to that melancholy feeling that does linger over this album. This is really where I think the heart of the album lies, and where some of Post's deepest introspective thoughts are brought to life. As this album is centrally about the dark side of fame, I think that this song could genuinely represent the entire album. However, we start to see that this album is super spacey. Geeked off shrooms and flooded with reverb, Post was in a way literally on another planet. But for this album, he needed to be. Since this album was recorded at a time where Post was at his lowest, Post's mental state wasn't great, and so he took to magic mushrooms to ease his mind and allow him to truly think about what he wanted to express in his next work. Not trying to appeal to a certain audience, Post wrote this album entirely about himself and moving forward in his life past everything he covered on his past 3 albums. Not to get too philosophical, but him taking magic mushrooms fully allowed him to disconnect from himself and let everything negative flow out of him and into his music. Almost like the 4th chapter in a book, this served as a page turn, in that he was denouncing that lifestyle and really felt like he was embracing Austin and not the lifestyle of Post Malone. Instead of being focused on radio or commercial domination, like he did with Hollywood's Bleeding, he was almost going for personal domination, or the abandonment of his old lifestyle in the years prior. This right here, this type of message and sound is why I think it took such a nosedive commercially. The modern music industry all flows around marketing, chartability, and sales. It doesn't care about how open or how dark an album gets or what the artist is talking about. It cares about if it can be pushed out to wide audiences and can be consumed over and over by people more and more. On top of a sonic change, going for a more ethereal and cinematic feel, since speaking about such intimate topics is incredibly difficult to digest or consume on a first listen, it leaves listeners confused as to why this album sounds the way it does compared to Hollywood's Bleeding, an album that doesn't compare in terms of how deep he goes in this. While it did develop its hits, I Like You, Cooped Up, and One Right Now, it took a bit and certainly sounded different than what he had made before. It's also obvious that all of these songs are happy songs. Usually, the sadder the song is, the harder it is to digest, the themes are deeper and requires a lot more to process and internalize, and it's just the way it works. These songs all sound upbeat with lots of relatively fast-paced beats, loud vocals, and all talk about pretty normal topics like post-relationships, designer handbags, and sold-out shows. Due to this unexpected and relatively quick, at least in music scale, shift in sounds, people weren't ready for it, and it led to such low sales compared to his previous work. This also explains why the hit songs worked in the way they did. The mid-track run, I Like You, I Cannot Be, and Insane are all tracks that are for the most part rap. Though they do stray a bit from his typical sound, as I follow suit with the rest of the sound on display in 12 Karat Toothache, they were the most similar to the ones that he had made before, and that's why people latched onto them so quickly. People flocked to what they know, and these felt like comfort tracks, and the posts that people wanted to know. The end of the album is where we truly see Post in his most wounded state. Directly after these three songs, we see a shift into the darker side of the album, starting with Love Hate Letter to Alcohol, which is a tribute track to how alcohol has treated him over the years and how he's treated it. The end of the album is where we truly see Post in his most wounded state. Euthanasia, When I'm Alone, and Waiting for a Miracle all deal with Post struggles with the idea of death and even the miracle of death, and now he wishes that he wants a life from all the pressure of being a superstar. It's no surprise that these are some of the least listened to, but this again speaks to what he was trying to convey here in this album. As these are very difficult for a casual listener and even a hardcore fan like me to digest, I think that these were more so meant to fit into the overall story of 12 Karat Toothache, and by the way that they sound and were arranged, makes me think that they're more of testaments to Post's deepest fears. This is especially true for Euthanasia and Waiting for a Miracle, as they don't follow much of a structure. They have minimal instruments and explore some incredibly dark and existential thoughts, both sonically and lyrically. Like when Post says, everything done for the dead after they're dead is for the living, talking about how people do things to comfort each other in times of despair and can't do anything for the dead, alluding to how he wants a life away from his past as a figure of Post Malone, and everything that went with that lifestyle, like partying, drinking, and smoking. Euthanasia, the minimal yet impactful beat following the pattern of a heartbeat that gets faster, as well as the tempo of the sound, almost hinting at that he's begging to release these feelings, and even if it may be a little at a time, he's slowly getting happier. 12 Karat Toothache at the end of the day tells a story about Post, people, and the industry. The fact that this album lags so far behind in terms of popularity from what he made before physically shows how people treat and view things. That if you switch your sound, and especially even going really deep in some of these songs, they don't take kindly to it and are much less likely to stick with them. It also proves that they both stick to what they know and only want what they're comfortable with and are scared of change. Though critically and commercially underrated, this album is a fantastic and transformative example of what an artist can put into an album. Post Malone set the stage for the next phase in his life, one where he put his old life filled with drinking, partying, and drugs behind him and embraced one of love and self-respect.